Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. This is Mitch Tanenbaum, and this is a security news update for May 29th, 2022. Tomorrow is Memorial Day. Please take a moment to thank servicemen and women who have protected us and keep us safe, both in the past and today. In the security and privacy alerts section, DISA has updated Emergency Directive 2203. That's the emergency directive that requires executive branch agencies to patch VMware within 5 days of the notice coming out, which was, I think that might be tomorrow. They added 2 more bugs in it that you have to patch for a total of 4. And while this is only binding on executive branch agencies, I think it probably is wise for businesses to do this as well. Broadcom has announced that they're going to buy VMware for more than $60 billion in cash and stock. Broadcom owns Symantec. VMware owns Carbon Black. And Broadcom is going to rename their software group from the Broadcom software group to VMware. Kind of says who's in charge there. This should close next year. We don't know what that means for VMware customers. Probably nothing, certainly in the short term, and possibly nothing in the long term either. So, I mean, VMware is a cash cow, so I don't think Broadcom wants to do anything stupid on that. Microsoft, in the section on software, Microsoft is rolling out new security settings. These security settings already apply to about 30 million companies, not 30 million users, but 30 million companies. And they plan to roll this out over the next year to an additional 60 million accounts. So they say, and I have no reason, I don't think they're lying, that companies that are using these security settings are 80% less likely to be compromised than the overall Microsoft population. So they're going to send out notices to folks that are impacted. So keep an eye out. Don't think that's spam, because that's for real. On the legislative and legal front, the feds have said that they're going to fine Twitter $150 million for privacy violations. Twitter agreed to pay the fine. I don't think they have much of a defense. They asked users to give them their phone numbers and email addresses, supposedly to go off and enhance security. In reality, what they did is they sold or gave that information to advertisers as an incentive to spend advertising money at Twitter. And the feds probably weren't too terribly happy about that. So that's 150 million bucks down the garbage disposal of Twitter's bank account. And then also on the legal side, Spain has agreed to tighten the controls on their spy agency. You probably remember that they got caught spying on their own Spanish politicians. It's okay to spy on regular citizens, just don't spy on us. They got caught at that. They were doing nothing illegal. They were following all the rules. They got subpoenas and whatever they needed to do under Spanish law. But boy, the politicians did not like it when they were the target of surveillance that all of us have to deal with on a daily basis. Under education, the hackers have figured out that browsers are doing better at detecting malicious scripts. So they're shifting from client-side scripting, JavaScript, to server-side scripting, PHP, and they're hiding their scripts inside of image files to make it harder for it to be detected. So just know that if you're running a server and you care about the information that's on there, they are doing this in part for stealing credit card information, but it works for stealing anything, intellectual property, anything that might be on your server. Think about your security measures and whether they're adequate given the reality of things. The Chicago Public Schools admitted that they were breached. The breach affected about 500,000 students and 50,000 staff members, but of course it's not their fault. It was the fault of the vendor that they picked and chose and managed and hopefully managed the cybersecurity of, but it's not our fault. It's Patel's fault. That's the vendor that they had chosen. So from that perspective, they certainly like to get out of being responsible, but I don't think anybody believes that for a minute. There is a large Canadian healthcare organization that was compromised. They had data back to 1996. I'm sure that's of interest to somebody. I'm not sure who, possibly anthropologists. But if you have data that goes back to 1996 and it's of personal nature, and in this case, healthcare related, you might want to make sure that your security controls are better than just average, middle of the road, because that's a juicy target for bad guys. And then for China, there was hackers leaked obviously they were pro-Uyghur hackers, dumped a massive dump of data from the concentration camps, the Uyghur concentration camps, what they call re-education camps. And it talks about the Chinese government practices, which include telling soldiers just to shoot people if they try to escape. You may remember that MGM had a breach back in 2019. There was, if I remember right, a couple 100 million people's data was compromised. At the time, the hackers sold the data, but now they're just giving it away. So the folks that were compromised back in 2019 are now being compromised again in 2022. Anybody who wants to can download the data. So much for that. On the daily security news front, two-factor authentication is not magic. It definitely helps. It's a good thing. But this is a story about a pretty tech-savvy journalist who got caught in a social engineering scam. And the bad news was, even though he writes for one of the largest tech magazines in the country, he was not able to go off and convince them to give him back his account. So he lost his account, he lost his data. And if that's of concern to you, then read this article and follow some good practices. And of course, if you need help, let us know. The U.S. is part of the CIRCA Security Act that was part of the spending bill that was passed late last year. A task force has been set up under CISA. I think part of good politics, the FBI was really pretty rankled that they weren't in charge of this. But I think for good reason. Even Congress figured out that's not the FBI's strong suit. They do okay at it and they try hard, but they don't have anywhere near as much cybersecurity expertise as CISA does. So Jen Easterly, the head of CISA, decided to make the FBI co-chair of this task force. We'll see what comes out of it. Hopefully, the good news is the government's got a lot of information about all these threats that are going on. Can they figure out a way to share that effectively and get people to respond to it quickly? That's the thing we don't understand. Next, most organizations do not follow backup best practices. In a survey of IT pros, 93% say they have a ransomware readiness plan, but there are gaps in the plan. Gee, that's a big surprise. Which group are you in? Do you have a plan? Are you in the 93%? Are you in the 7%? Do you have gaps in your plan? Do you not have any gaps in your plan? And remember that the cyber insurance companies are going to start asking for this stuff because they're trying to manage their risk as well. So if you don't have a plan and you haven't tested it, the cyber insurance company may say, yeah, I don't think we want to give you coverage. And in the security news bites, the Russians are on the wrong end of this news again. They've been getting whacked pretty good in the cyber attacks, but now another Russian military asset, in this case, it's a jet engine engineering design and testing facility outside of Moscow, caught fire, judging by the plume of very dark smoke that hung over the facility for a long time. The facility is not in great shape. I'm sure there's a lot of jet fuel there, which burns really well once it gets started. And they're blaming Ukraine, but who knows whether that really was Ukraine. And if it was Ukraine, did they have some help from some folks who are friendly to Ukraine? Not to mention any names like the US or Israel, for example. GM says it was hit by a credential stuffing attack. What that means is that hackers took credentials from old breaches and tried to see if people were just reusing them on their GM account. Sure enough, whole bunch of people were reusing passwords, and they were able to go off and cash in the points that people had at their GM site. GM, because they're nice people and they thought the PR would be good for them, decided to reimburse the points to people who were compromised. I don't think they have any legal responsibility for that because they were not hacked. This was, bad cybersecurity practices. Next, in China arena, the Quad nations, that's the United States, India, Japan, and Australia, have agreed to collaborate more on cybersecurity and other practices designed mostly to piss off China. China is not happy. They thought that the Quad group was going to be a passing fad. Turns out that's not the case. And there's a lot of people who are interested in making life tough for China. And so we shall see where this goes, but this is not the message that China wanted to see. We are seeing more ransomware attacks just move to plain out and out extortion. In fact, some of the ransomware groups aren't even bothering to go off and encrypt the data. They're just stealing it and say either you give us money or we'll either sell the data or we will just post it, whichever is more embarrassing, or some combination of the both. As we saw with the MGM attack, first they sold it and then they posted it for free. And lastly, CISA added 75 more bugs to their list of actively exploited must-patch bugs. Now, this list only is mandatory to federal executive branch agencies, civilian executive branch agencies, but you might want to check it yourself. Among the things that are on that list now are old obsolete software like Silverlight and Flash, and we see this all the time. So if you have not literally removed those software products from your system, you should do that. You should uninstall them. As always, if you need help, please reach out to us. And until next time, thanks for listening.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.